And I would like to take and welcome our first speaker for the CUR MCS Undergraduate Research Speaker Series. Dr. Edray Goins is a well-known scholar and researcher who was recently appointed to the SPUR Journal Advisory Board as the Math, Statistics, Computer Science topic expert. In this role, he assists the SPUR editor-in-chief and associate editors in reviewing all SPUR submissions. And he will be able to take and share advice today on publishing with SPUR, as well as his experience in mentoring and supporting undergraduate research. So with that, Dr. Goins, please take it away.
All right, yeah, thank you very much. No, it's really a pleasure and an honor to be the first speaker here, but I do have to admit, I really am hoping to learn from you all today. I'm actually brand new to being one of the editors, and there's still a lot that I have to learn. So I really wanted to welcome this opportunity, really just to hear from you all, to learn from you all, just to see what more can we do with the journal here. I first want to thank Hasib, who I used to work with when I was in the state of Indiana for many, many years. He's been very kind to kind of help to answer a lot of the really simple questions that I've had about this whole experience. What I'd like to do is say a little bit about who I am, how I came to all of this, and kind of my own experiences when it comes to working with undergraduates. But after I do that, I really do want to open this up just to kind of hear from you, and mostly to have a discussion about a lot of these concepts. So let me start just kind of with the standard boilerplate disclaimer that NSF likes to make us do. Any of the opinions, findings, and conclusions that I'm going to talk about here, of course, are those of myself and not those of the National Science Foundation. So let me say, who am I? As I mentioned, I was at Purdue University for about 14 years. I was there from 2004 through 2018. You can see here some of the pictures that kind of just show my former life. The one in the upper right is a photo of when I was the advisor for the undergraduate math club. And I'm happy to see that this group here is working with one of the Sigmas. This is, of course, the special interest group with the MAA. I used to take my undergraduates to the MAA section meetings in Indiana, and the section there has a really special place in my heart. So this photo here has a picture of myself, Sam Wagstaff, who actually was a speaker at that conference, and a few of the undergraduates, several of whom have gone off to grad school now. The lower left photo is actually a photo of my very, very first graduate student to get a PhD in math. This is Kevin Mugo, who's in the black shirt, and myself in the white shirt and the stripes and the shorts is there in the middle. And then the one on the lower right is actually a picture of my very last graduate student. This is Alex Barrios, who I've actually run several RAUs with. Actually, his wife, Carla's in the middle, Coralie Colbert, who is kind of one of my mentees, and he also helped out with the RAU that I ran this last summer, and then myself in the cap and gown on the right-hand side of the photo. From here, I then moved to California, where I'm now at Pomona College. You can see here a few photos for the mathematics and statistics department. I like to call it a math building. Other people like to call it a boutique because it is very, very pretty. The building here was renovated maybe about 7 years ago. So it is as pretty as it looks here in the pictures. I feel really fortunate. I'm really happy to be here. There are several faculty here who are very well known nationwide for the work that they do with the undergraduates. You can see here Stefan Garcia. Let's see. Actually, Stefan is, on the second row on the very left. He's, in a sense, kind of one of the models when it comes to doing undergraduate research. He typically publishes 3-4 papers every year. This is just with students during the academic year. He himself is not running RU, but he certainly does a lot of work and gets a lot of publications when it comes to working with students. And the third row in the middle is Amy Radinskaya. She is a former president of the Association for Women in Mathematics. She also works in applied mathematics, where she works with a lot of students as well. Quick plug, she's running for vice president for the AMS, so please, please vote for her. These two colleagues are just individuals that I love to chat with because they certainly give me a lot of advice when it comes to working with students, finding projects, and even publishing with them. This is a photo of the various students that I try to mentor and work with. Some of these are math majors, most of these are not math majors, but still some of these are students that just have an interest in some of the work that I'm doing. So I'm going to talk about a few of these students later, but I wanted to point out that this is actually a photo of all of the Black students that were considering majoring in the mathematical sciences when I first got here to campus back in summer 2019. And most of these have graduated, but a few of these are on the way to graduate this coming December. I want to say a little bit about my own experiences with undergraduate research. I know that at some points here throughout the seminar, you're going to talk about things like, how do you find research projects? How do you get funding to work with students? How do you get some of these papers published? So I wanted to say a little bit about my own experiences in not only running RUs, but just being involved with undergraduate experiences over the years. One of my very first experiences was actually at Miami University of Ohio. They had a wonderful program that they ran there for years called the Summer Undergraduate Mathematical Sciences Research Institute, SUMSRI. SUMSRI was an interesting RU in that it had about 18 students. There were 3 different research groups, but they brought in researchers from other schools around the country. They didn't just have faculty at Miami, they actually had faculty from all over. So I was actually a faculty that was coming from Purdue, and I would just drive about 2 or 3 hours, head over there to about the southeastern part of Indiana, drive over to the state of Ohio, and just have a great time working with the students. The one guy that you see here in the photo should look familiar. This is Kevin Mugo, and I actually use this as a recruiting tool to get more students to work with me for graduate school. So of course, Kevin's graduated, several other faculty members here have graduated. Let's see, Hasib, you might notice Katie Insaldi, who's to my left. She's actually a faculty member there in Indiana at Wabash College. This was pretty much the first RU that I was involved with, and I learned a lot. I learned about the idea of finding research projects that were suitable for students, working with some of the other research leaders, getting an idea of how they do their projects, learning about things like the outside speakers that we'd have to come in, about going to dinners with the students, and even having field trips on the weekends. I was not involved, however, at this point, about reading applications and selecting students. And that's something I'll come back to as I go on here. Then over the last several years, I've run my own RU that now I call the Pomona Research and Mathematics Experience, or PRIME. When I originally had it at Purdue University, it actually had the same acronym. It was called the Purdue Research and Mathematics Experience. Some people like to think that I changed institutions and specifically chose an institution that had the same letter P as the title. I don't really know if that's true or not, but it's just worked out very nicely over the years. So here's some action shots of students that I've had over the years. So you can kind of see them working in groups, the field trips that we've had over the weekends, and then them actually getting ready for one of the presentations. So let me say a little bit more about PRIME so you can kind of get an idea of how things have worked over the years. It is an RU, it's a residential program that runs for 8 weeks. I first officially ran it starting in summer of 2016, where it was funded by the National Science Foundation. I eventually, for one summer, decided to fund it out of the National Security Agency. This is because I wanted to try to change around the program, and it's a slightly complicated thing. But I do want to point out here, at least, that I have received funding both from the National Science Foundation and the National Security Agency. The process is more or less the same. I have found it to be a little bit less painful to worry about the process from the NSF than opposed to the NSA, but still more or less the process of applying for funding is pretty much the same with both of these. So I'm happy to talk at some point if anybody's interested in maybe some of the subtleties between having funding through the two. But still, over this 8-week program, I've had around 15 students or so, mostly from schools, not my home institution. I've also had at least one other person who's helped me run the research projects over the summer. Alex Barrios has mainly helped me to run the research projects the last several years. I've also had Rachel Davis, who's a faculty member at University of Wisconsin-Madison, who's helped me as well. But I really have tried to kind of make sure to have a residential program for 8 weeks that's had about 15 students or so. I just want to show a few photos here so you can kind of see what the groups of students have looked like over the years. I forgot to mention that Jonathan Peterson here actually did help me run the program when it was at Purdue. Jonathan actually was the one that helped me to write the NSF grant the very first time that I got it funded. So here you can see back when we had the program in 2016. This was the last year I had it at Purdue University, summer 2017. Jonathan also ran a group, but it just turns out that I only had the photo for my group from this summer. 2018 is the summer that I moved from Purdue to Pomona, so I decided not to run the program that summer. Here's a program when it was moved to Pomona in 2019. The pandemic hit, and of course, everything had to go virtual. So here's a picture from the virtual RU when it was summer 2020. We also had to run it virtual summer 2021. And this last summer, 2022, we did run it in person. It was a different program. So you can see here that we actually had more students. We actually had 15 undergraduates, 5 graduate students, and 5 faculty members. Also in this photo, there were a few other visitors, some speakers, and other professional development workshop leaders that we had. So like I said, it was a very different kind of program, but still essentially it was an RU. I wanted to point out that there are 2 types of research projects that I've been involved with. And this kind of, if you will, mitigates the way that I really think of publications when it comes to working with students. First, let me mention that I have done a math history RU, which I think a lot of people haven't really thought whether it's possible, but summer 2020, I actually did this. It was actually based on expanding work that was done by Scott Williams back in the early 2000s. Scott Williams is a Black mathematician. He was at SUNY Buffalo for years and years. He was interested in just writing biographies and stories of various Black mathematicians, people that he had met at conferences. And because this is kind of the nascent stages of the internet, he introduced his own website in 1997, where he would write page after page on his own about various individuals that he would meet. Over about the 10 years or so that he did this series of web pages, he had about 1,000 pages or so. The site had about maybe 1 million visitors that hit it over those 10 years. It was really an incredible project, but it was 100% a labor of love. He didn't get paid for it. He didn't get any major recognition. He just did it because he was just really interested in figuring out who were other Black mathematicians out there. Well, he retired in 2008, and a few of us got together to try to figure out what do we do to continue this site, to update the pages, add in more people, and what have you. 4 of us got together: Don King, who's at Northeastern University, Asamoah Quanta, who's at Morgan State University in Baltimore, and John Weaver, who's actually a website developer. He does varsity software. I got together with myself to figure out how to update the pages. Essentially, we went from kind of like this ad hoc page after page model that Scott Williams had to come up with a database. And then this database would just generate pages on the fly. So currently there are around 800 names in this database. And of course, we're working to try to increase and have more names as we speak. Of course, once you have the database, you still have to worry about things like quality control, making sure that you are adding more names as more and more Black mathematicians get their PhDs and become professors. So summer of 2020, I used the pandemic and the money that I had left over from the NSF grant to hire a group of 8 undergraduates to worry about updating the pages. And I'm not going to worry about going through all the details of what we did here, but we basically spent that summer as part of the virtual RU working on biographies, finding names, and putting all of this there into the database. So it was a wonderful project and we had a good time, but we still needed to keep going. You know, as you might imagine, these things are ongoing projects. They're never just going to stop because you have the names and then that's it. I then did something very different and applied for funding through the Center for Undergraduate Research in Math. This was so that I could work with students throughout the academic year to continue working on this project. So here's a photo of the group that we decided to call Matter. Remember that the math pages is what Scott Williams had worked on, the mathematicians at the African diaspora. Since we moved everything over to a database, we decided that we needed to have an ensemble of researchers to work on this. I didn't come up with this name. One of my undergraduates actually came up with this. I thought it was brilliant when he said it. It was kind of a joke at first, to say that we went from the map pages and got matter, but it, for me, just stuck. And so I just use it all the time now. But again, during the academic year, we decided that we were going to continue working on this. I actually worked with with Robin Wilson, who's a math professor over at Cal Poly Pomona. We decided to have kind of two sets of students working on this. We had 8 students from Pomona College, and then there are 5 students from Pomona College and 3 students from Cal Poly Pomona. It's about 15 minutes away from here, where we just worked several hours every week. We actually met virtually for the 2 groups together, to just talk about writing the biographies, making sure that we weren't missing any names. Let me point out that there were 3 specific research questions that we were actually focused on. Number 1, who are the first Black women to earn PhDs in mathematics? This was actually a more complicated question than it sounds, because we actually realized that there were several articles out there that claimed that they had the first few names. Just in putting together the database that we had, we realized that every one of those articles was incorrect. For every one of them, we at least had 10 names that were not there in those articles. So we're still working on finalizing all of this. We're actually still writing up the results, but this was one of the first big things that we wanted to do as part of that project, just answer the question, who were the first Black women to earn their PhDs in math. We're also working on finding the recent African Americans to receive their PhDs in math. There's somewhere around 20 or so every year to get their degrees. So we're just trying to keep track of those 20 names. We can kind of add those to the database every year. And also we'd like to know the total number of African Americans receive PhDs in mathematics. You can look at things like Wikipedia pages, and it claims that the first 20 or so that they have listed. You can ask the question, how does Wikipedia know that it has all the right names? Turns out that it doesn't. That's also something that we found out as part of this research. So we realized this really great thing that we could focus on just the names and the history and the biography by working not only with the RUs, but also having this funding throughout the academic year to work on some of these projects. So this has all been one aspect that's been a part of Prime, is working here on kind of this mathematical history, if you will, just in trying to find names and stories. Well, another set of projects that I've worked on has been in algebraic geometry. And so I want to say just a little bit about how Prime has worked in that sense. For the most part, Prime is really focused on algebraic geometry. Again, it's run since about 2016 or so. I've had about 39 students that have gone through the program. Let me just give you a full disclaimer. I have not finished running the numbers from summer 2022. So this is all from 2016 through about 2021. There have been 29 alumni, roughly half have been Black. A good majority of the participants have been from liberal arts colleges. It's my own personal thing. I really like to work with students that don't have those opportunities to do research. So I really try my best to find students that are either women, underrepresented minorities, first generation low income students. They're coming from liberal arts colleges, minority serving institutions, historically Black colleges. I have had students that have gone to really fancy places like Caltech and Harvard and Yale, but I'll tell you right now, those have all been minority students that for one reason or another have never had a research experience, even though they're fancy places like Caltech, Harvard, and Yale. So really the big part here of my experience with RUs has been really trying to find those students that have never done research during the summer before. A good number of our students have gone on to graduate school. 22 out of the 39 that we know of have gone on to graduate school. Various of them have gone on to grad school in mathematics. I just don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. And over the years, we've had students give papers, give talks, poster presentations, and what have you. I will say that I have not really been pushing that one of the goals of the RU is to publish a paper. I have been pushing, on the other hand, that the goal of the RU is to give the students the experience of learning about mathematics culture. So this could be doing research. It could also be meeting speakers from other schools. It could also be giving presentations at conferences. But I am a very big fan of giving them the experience of learning about what math culture is all about. If we can publish a paper, great. But really for me, the big part is just having them to learn more about, how this whole process works. I just maybe want to say a little bit behind some of the mathematics that happens at the RU. So if you don't work in algebraic geometry or number theory, please don't let any of this scare you. This is just to kind of show a lot of pretty pictures so you can get a rough idea of what's happening. I typically motivate a lot of what I'm doing with this question that I'm giving you now. Which rational numbers are the areas of right triangles that have sides of rational lengths A, B, and C? This means we're looking for three rational numbers, A, B, and C, so that by the Pythagorean theorem, A squared plus B squared equals C squared, and N is the area, so N is 1/2 A times B. It turns out that there's a trick you can do that says that you can relate that question to a different question that says, find rational numbers X and Y that satisfy this cubic relation. Y squared is equal to X cubed minus N squared X. You can see the formulas here on the screen that essentially allow you to go back and forth between these two. In particular, a 3, 4, 5 triangle should correspond to having area 6, right? So N is equal to 6 is the area of a right triangle that has rational lengths A, B, and C. And this 3, 4, 5, if you play around with the formulas, corresponds to the rational point 12, 36. So I am interested in this cubic relation, y squared is equal to x cubed minus n squared x. And in fact, more generally, you can take a look at an equation of the form y squared is equal to x cubed plus ax plus b, where a and b are complex numbers satisfying a certain relationship. These things are called elliptic curves, and they're actually seen in quite a lot of places: number theory, computer science, and physics. But I typically like to introduce elliptic curves for a very naive reason when I'm working with undergraduates, simply put, so that I can draw pictures. What I mean by that is you can take a look at these types of graphs here on the screen. By graphs, I just mean things like vertices and edges and trying to draw things in this way here. Well, the three at the top look very different from the three at the bottom, because the three at the bottom don't look as pretty. You know, the edges here seem to be kind of overlapping in different ways. And I love to draw all 6 of these so that I have vertices and edges, and the edges don't look like they're kind of overlapping with each other. Well, if I do that, then that means I have to draw all of these in really exotic looking shapes. The three at the top shouldn't be as surprising, because now I've just kind of wrapped a sheet of paper, my plane, around to the surface of a sphere. Right? Many of you may know this as stereographic projection, but it's the three at the bottom that are a lot more exotic. There now, I've had to draw my graphs on a surface of a torus. And it's not exactly so obvious that I can do this, but I've drawn things now so that none of the edges that you see here overlap at all. Now, there is a canonical way to do this. It's something called a dessin d'enfant. There's a way you can do this by relating a very special surface that you like to draw this on, what's called a Riemann surface, and a function that gives you a prescribed way to do this is what's called a belly pair. Those of you that know French, a dessin d'enfant does mean a child's drawing. I'm not going to worry about kind of the history of this, but quite literally, we're just trying to say we want to draw these funny looking graphs in a really exotic way by kind of introducing this thing here called a belly pair. Here are some examples of these so-called dessin d'enfants. You've already seen the first 3 at the top. I've just drawn 3 slightly more complicated ones here at the bottom. The important thing is that these functions, these beta of z's, are the belly maps in this case. They're kind of these weird looking functions that give you back information about the graphs that you see here on the screen. These functions can be very, very complicated. So here are some that I've drawn where maybe the 2 at the bottom corresponding to drawing graphs on the sphere, but the 2 at the top corresponding to drawing things on the surface of a torus. Now, I've written this here to say that you can do all of this fancy algebra and writing down all of these nice equations, or you can focus on the geometry and actually focusing on the pictures here. So hopefully you notice how I kind of tied in algebraic geometry there, you know, the algebra and the geometry. So the 2 here at the bottom would be the dessin d'enfants that we would have on the surface of the sphere. And as I sort of write down more and more complicated belly maps, you can see here now that I have slightly more complicated dessin d'enfants with the ones here at the top. Now, I do want to think of this quite literally as covering maps, in the sense of as I kind of collapse my edges together, then I go from more complicated descends at the top to lesser and lesser complicated ones at the bottom. Right, but that's kind of the idea of some of these maps here, is that quite literally they're covering spaces and just branch maps of Riemann surfaces. But really the right way to think of this is that I just have these nice looking graphs that go from graphs to the torus down to graphs on the sphere. I do want to say that there are applications here that I personally do care about. These two descendant fonts that I've mentioned here at the top actually can be written in a slightly different way. If I kind of take a look at the graphs here in a slightly different way, they actually are related to what are called adinkras. This is a concept in mathematical physics that was invented by Michael Fox and Sylvester Jim Gates about a decade or so ago. And I've been very interested in trying to see what are some applications of all of this to supersymmetry. It turns out that you can actually write down a lot of the properties that you wish to have in various supersymmetric situations with bosons and fermions by encoding them in terms of descendant fonts and very special Belly maps. So this is to say that there is a direct application to all of the pictures that you see here and what's actually happening in supersymmetry. So all of that being said, let me maybe spend the last couple of minutes or so just saying, how is it that I'm involved with this journal? I will be the first to tell you that I am brand new to all of this. I essentially received a phone call about a month or so ago stating that there was this journal that was being sponsored by the Council on Undergraduate Research, and mathematics really hasn't been that involved historically, and would I, as a math professor, like to be involved? I said yes, as long as I'm not an editor, because I'm too busy to be an editor. Well, you can kind of see how all that worked out. So I really am very interested in trying to help out and just really getting the word out about what's happening with undergraduate research in mathematics in particular. So this is something that I am very interested in being a part of, but I'm the first to tell you there's a lot that I don't know. Hasib has been really wonderful and give me kind of a talk about the history and about various organizations within CUR, but it's still something that I definitely would like to learn more about. My understanding is that there are quite a lot of us that are on the editorial advisory board. There are a list of editors. We are not quite the editors. It's more like we're kind of helping with the editors and the whole process. Pam, Patricia Maybrook, I've talked to a little bit about how all of this works. If you actually do go to the website, I'm very sorry that the names got cut off here. There are several individuals that are on the advisory board that are in things like biology and chemistry and some of the wet labs, but I am the only one that's involved with the mathematical sciences. I'm hoping that that will change. I am hoping that there's going to be a lot more involvement in terms of the advisory board when it comes to mathematics. So there's something that I'm actively talking with Pam about. Now, let me say a little bit of my understanding of how SPUR works. My understanding is that there essentially are 4 types of articles that you can submit for the journal. There's a perspectives, there's an article, there's a vignette, and there are book reviews. They do vary quite a lot in length, and it really just depends on what you're trying to get out. I do understand that this may not be ideal for a lot of us, that the articles here are typically asked to be submitted in Word, not in LaTeX. I just recently found out about this. So again, these are things that I'm just learning about myself. A typical article length might be around 3,000 words or so, but there are opportunities to write slightly shorter articles, book reviews, and what have you, sitting at about 500 words. I think that it's very standard that a lot of journals nowadays have you to submit articles online. So you can see here, the link at the bottom of the screen is just the standard place that you might want to submit an article for the journal. I believe that there is around half a dozen or so volumes that are produced every year. Some of the volumes do have some type of a special theme to them. So kind of all of the articles, book reviews, what have you, might be kind of surrounding a certain theme. I know that those of us on the advisory board have been discussing new types of themed articles, or should I say themed volumes to come out over the coming year or so. That is something that I do want to talk about. It's really just some thoughts and maybe some themed volumes that we might want to have that might be a little bit more focused on the mathematical sciences. But this is my understanding in terms of the types of articles that SPUR would publish in its volumes. I really will just end here by saying there are a few things that I've been thinking about in the short time that I've been on the advisory board. Number one, I know that not a lot of articles have come out that are involving the mathematical sciences. I think that this type of seminar that we're doing now will be wonderful, and I do hope that this will really spur more discussion to come out in this journal. I personally, as I said earlier, have been very interested in different types of research that we can do with undergraduates, not just your pure math research, but also things like history of mathematics. I know that there's a lot of other questions that we can ask, such as, if you don't have the time to do research during the summer, when might you possibly do research with students? This is why I was really interested in how things worked out with my grant from CUR, the Center for Undergraduate Research in Math, and that we did work with students throughout the academic year, the fall semester and the spring semester. There are even subtle questions such as, if you want your students to present at a conference during the academic year, how do you do this? Remember that students are going to be taking classes. They have to worry about their own homework. They just can't up and leave for a week during the year to go out to a conference. And even worse, they probably won't have many results to present. If you do research over the summer, at the end of the summer, you write things up, then maybe you can go to the joint mathematics meetings, for example, to present. But if you're working during the school year, maybe if they start working in the fall, they may not have results by January to present. So where do students present their research? And I can say that that's something that actively I've thought about. But I think that hopefully writing articles for this journal would help to kind of give some of this information out to the larger community. Where do you get your students to present? How do you find funding? It's not just like the standard NSF, NSA, but there might even be other places in which you can try to get funding as well. I'd like to also worry about increasing visibility with SPUR within the mathematical sciences community. I think that it's wonderful that this group is involved with the UR Sigma, with the undergraduate research Sigma, but I think that there's a lot of other groups out there, individuals that are doing research with students that maybe don't know about Sigma. They aren't involved with the MAA. I remember that we do have other parts of the mathematical sciences community: computer science, statistics, data science, math education. And these are things that I've been actively thinking about, for individuals there who do this research, where do they go? Some of you may not have heard about this. There's a new idea of turning an RU on its head that's actually called a TEU. This is a teaching experience for undergraduates. I've seen a few of these programs out there in the summer where you take students that have an interest in, let's say, math education. You then put them in a classroom for the summer. Of course, they have one-on-one with a mentor who's the teacher, and they actually teach for about 8 weeks. This thing gives them hands-on real-world experience while they're undergraduates and what it means to actually teach and do math education in the classroom. I believe Vassar College is one of the first in the country that's been running this. But again, this is all part of the mathematical sciences community, but it's not clear to me how many people actually know about this idea of a TEU, a teaching experience for undergraduate. Again, this is something that I really have an interest in, and actually increasing the visibility of different opportunities and programs like this for those of us that are in the community. And finally, I really have been thinking a lot about what are some special issues that we might want to have as part of SPUR. I'm just kind of looking back over some of the previous volumes. I did see that a couple of summers ago, there was a volume on big data and undergraduate research. I'm really wondering, is it time to maybe revisit a volume such as that? I do know that there's a lot of other questions that are coming out these days. More and more students nowadays are working on things like mathematical biology, of course, modeling of infectious diseases, looking at what's happening with COVID-19. But I realized that there's a lot of different projects that students really have an interest in. Big data and data science is one, but I think that there's others that may actually cause us to really think about having an interesting special volume of that as well. So again, these are just some thoughts that I have, but maybe I'll be quiet and just leave it out there to say, I really do want to thank you for the opportunity here just to come out and chat, but I'd love to hear from you all on your thoughts on all of this. So thanks very much for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Goins. This was very I think, a knowledgeable and beneficial talk for us, the counselors, and Dr. Brandy Wiegers did a wonderful job by recording that. I was trying to explain earlier that since we did not publicize it much, we were working with the national office to see how we are going to run the registration and posting of these talks via CUR's platform. So, but this recording will be placed somewhere in our Google Drive, or we will discuss with Dr. Wiegers and Dr. Timothy Smith and other folks, what should we do to give more people accessibility to your talk. But some of the avenues that you have touched and talked about, the options, those are wonderful, and especially the teaching experiences for undergraduates. That's wonderful. So one,
Well,
I guess I would let others ask questions at this point. So.
Well, I want to start first by thanking you. So there were several people that thanked you in the chat. So thank you, great talk. It was great. I just want to make sure, I know this is the most awkward part, I think, about being virtual. So if people wanted to react, even if their videos are off, and just sort of let you know how much we really appreciated this talk. So I wanted to start off there.
Yeah, thank you.
And also give those people, if you don't want to turn back on your video, if you did want to write in the chat, I'm very happy to voice out loud anything that gets put in the chat. And I agree, as Dr. Kazi said, this was a great talk and I really appreciated it. I had a student that actually worked with you in your previous virtual prime, and it was life-changing for her. It was really helpful for her to just sort of see so many role models. And so I want to thank you for the really awesome programs that you've put together. I hadn't made that connection until you talked about it today. So thank you. It was awesome to see. And I look forward to your leadership on the SPUR advisory board. I think the ideas that you're sharing are really exciting, and from there. So I think that's enough of me trying to delay. Questions from the group?
Oh, may I ask a question here? If somebody else wanted to ask, I'll let you go first. So, okay. So would you please give us an idea about the timeline? Like if we want to submit anything for consideration for publication, how soon in advance before the publication we should submit, and what would be your approximate timeline about a response, whether it is accepted or not, or whether you send it back and do refinements? Would you please say something about that?
Right. Thanks for that question. I'm going to make a guess here because, this is something where I do need to learn a little bit more about the details of this system. My understanding is that, let's say paper comes in that we have to do standard thing of find a referee and so on and so forth. I'm going to guess probably think about maybe 3 to 4 months lead time for something to be published. Again, this is just my gut instinct. I'm not completely sure about the details in this case. Probably it'll take about 2 weeks to a month once the paper comes in to be assigned to a referee. It might take like another month, maybe 2 months or so for the referee to come back and then make some edits. Since the articles here are relatively short, I wouldn't imagine it would take that long for the referee process to happen. So that's what I'm thinking, 1 to 2 months max. But then from there, it has to come back, and then we have to worry about the whole thing of which volumes, the right volume should it appear in? Should it appear in this one? Should they wait until the next one? I think that's going to be more of a discussion with the advisory board, and then also talking with Pam as the kind of the head editor. I'm guessing that may stretch out the time from when it appears. So it might be that the next journals is going to be perfect and appear right away. It might be that we decide because of whatever page length, it has to appear a little bit further out. So it might be another month or two. That's my guess, but I have to admit, I don't have the fine details from Pam just yet. So I hope that helps somewhat.
So do you think that within next month or so, let's say within a month or 2 months, we can have some brief written guidelines that we can share tentative so that people who are counselors or other members of our division or anyone else who wants to send something, they have better ideas. And also, second question with that was, you mentioned sending the papers to referees. So is that kind of one paper is going to be sent to more than one referees, and you will, or it would be, what is your insight on that? So
Again, I don't have the details. I think I would assume that it's going to go to at least 2 referees. Again, I don't expect this to be a very long, drawn out process because, like I say, the articles are relatively short. I think that you are right in that it would be good to have these guidelines, these timelines in a written document for you. I have to admit, even for myself, I don't have anything in hand right now, so I'm not completely sure, exactly how the process would go. This is just kind of my understanding in terms of other journals and how other journals do things. It seems like it's very standard along those lines.
as shared document there in chat. So guideline, reviewer guidelines. Okay, that's from winter of 21. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so yeah, this will be when it's sent off to the referee, kind of what we're asking the referee to do. But in terms of, what we have to do in terms of getting it to the referee and then it coming back to us and then it appearing in print, I think that would be good to at least let this group know kind of timeline and how all of that process works. I know I was kind of flipping through the website and I didn't really see any details there, but I think some of this, we probably have to talk to Pam about. Yeah, with this document that was just sent, I was actually discussing some of this in the presentation, saying things like, when you submit a document, that it really should be maybe like, one of these 4. And then from there, the referee is going to read things slightly differently depending on what they're looking at. But yeah, but I'm not going to try to say more about this without looking at that more carefully.
We do have an annual meeting of CUR counselors, and the editor-in-chief presented at that this June. And one of the things I really appreciated that I think you're sharing with us was that SPUR has a very supportive editorial staff. So her goal is really to keep on working with authors until it is publish ready. So it's not, that was something that made me want to take in and think about presenting in this group, was just, she was a really supportive editor-in-chief from.
That was great to hear.
I just wanted to chime in on that, just to kind of throw it out there. If you're ever needing any help, whether it's informal or as a reviewer, if you're looking for somebody in the data science stats area, don't hesitate to let me know. I'd be happy to help in any way I could. And thanks for the excellent talk today. Appreciate it.
Right. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Tim, can you tell me where are you? What?
I'm at a private aeronautical university down in Florida. It's called Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. So
yep, I definitely heard of it.
Yeah. I grew up in Florida and the rockets and everything. That's my passion. So, but my background's math and now I'm in data science.
Okay, excellent.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And Tim, Professor Tim Smith, he is also involved with the program review request. So, and we have Dr. Anthony Kapolka. He was also involved with the program review request in the areas of computer science, basically. And so, I mean, Tim has a good background in data science, and he had a very good contribution in that program review. And so we have very worthy members who can provide you help as you need.
Okay.
So anyone else had any other questions before I have one more song?
I'm gonna say one more time, there was a couple more compliments in the chat, so definitely it's worth checking those out.
Of course. So, Dr. Goins, as you are an accomplished person, I have heard your inspirational talks and keynote talks, and you are well known, many contributions in various areas. So, what do you think? What is the scope of undergraduate research or internships in the area of study abroad, but like students going abroad and pursuing something as a math research or faculty-led trips, something like that. So do you have, or in the future, can you have any input or guideline for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks. Yeah, I have a good number of students that have actually been asking me that this day. How do you find research projects if you want to study abroad? I have to admit that's something where I don't know a lot about it, especially when it comes to doing mathematics. One way that we get around that here at Pomona College is by having study abroad, say, throughout the academic year, then maybe having a contact, and then eventually trying to use that to find a position elsewhere. I know that a couple of programs that probably a lot of you have heard of will be Budapest semesters in math and Budapest semesters in math education, right? BSM and BSME. I know a lot of students typically do that for maybe one semester or so. It's part of the culture here at Pomona College. The students would go, say, for a semester in their junior year. There, they would be able to do, say, take a class or several classes while they're there in Budapest, but then also they'd be able to do some kind of a research project, work with some other students. And then when they come back, then of course they're really gung-ho about doing research. A lot of them, they do want to study abroad, or they want to do research abroad. I have heard of some students that will just email a random professor that they see on the website asking to do some research. I had one student this past summer who was in Israel. She actually was an international student and found it really difficult to find experiences here in the US. A lot of the RUs here, they're going to be funded by either NSF or NSA, and those require the students either be US citizens, permanent residents. They can also be, drawing a blank on the name right now. Basically, they have to be either US residents or permanent citizens or permanent residents. But if you're not, it's actually really difficult to find RUs that do this. There's only a handful that have private money where they can get away with doing this. So I've known more and more students that are looking to go abroad. So this one student did just find an RU in Israel, and she did that, and she had a really good time. I had a student in physics. They did research in Japan one summer. He just found a professor on the website, emailed them, and just was able to do it. So I wish I could say more about more of like a standard way of finding research experiences overseas. I don't really know what to tell students other than, try to ask around, try to find people here and there.
So do you, I know you have been president of the National Association of Mathematics, I guess, and I have had discussions with you, and you have established a very good database. So has this ever been in the works with your organization or somewhere else where people have tried to compile a database of mentors in the USA who are willing to take students from abroad? Because after the COVID situation, online collaboration has been a trend. So, I mean, of course, we don't have much time at this point, but I would personally like to have your insight on this, and we can maybe communicate personally later. There are reasons why I'm asking, because my students, we are planning to take a trip abroad anyway for a short duration, and I thought maybe we can make it somehow a research trip, such as the study, history or something else, so that we make it more beneficial to students. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
I'll just say just a couple of thoughts on that. I definitely have been thinking more behind how do you find funding for international students if they want to do research, at least here in the United States? There is more of a push these days to have virtual options to doing an RU. So there's something called polymath. Maybe you have heard of this. This was kind of this idea that Terry Tao had years ago of like, what happens in some sense if you kind of crowdsource doing an RU? So you would have various research leaders from all over the country, various students from all over the country. They might have like a list of maybe 30 problems. And then you just have like a group of students and faculty all kind of working on that one problem. They then solve it, they can then kind of move on to the next one. So polymath has been running, I guess, for maybe about 3 years now. It's actually been a really successful RU. They probably have in the order of like 20, 25 faculty, I think maybe about 40 or so undergraduates that have done this. I've had a couple of international students that have done this RU. They've had a really good time. Let me point out though that polymath is not really funded. The faculty don't get paid, the students don't get paid. It's a virtual thing, but they still have publications that are coming out of this. The second thing that I'll mention is I've noticed that there are some faculty out there that have joint sponsorships with research institutes in other countries. And what they'll do is they might say, take a group of students, a group of faculty to that specific research institute for the summer and then do research there. So sometimes the institutes themselves will have funding, like, as part of a workshop or what have you, and then they can bring out students or faculty there. I know that in the African continent, there's something called AIMS, the African Institute of the Mathematical Sciences. There are maybe 5 or so AIMS all over the continent. And I've seen different faculty, you and I have a good friend, Elaine Togby. I know he's done various of these programs at AIMS over the summer. There's another person I know of named Overton Jinda, who is at Auburn University. He also has kind of like this joint program, but he also does work at AIMS over the summer. So I've seen things like that happen. But to answer your original question about maybe there being a list, I only know of informal lists. I don't know of anything formally that's been written down. Like I may be on 1 or 2 email chains where somebody says, do you happen to know of an RU that's running this summer where they're going to take international students? Then 1 or 2 people might say, well, we're going to take a couple this summer. But I don't know of any concerted list. I believe Steve Butler, who's at Iowa State University, he has a list of RUs and other programs where it's a little bit different from the NSF list. These are just in general summer programs for students. I believe he has a column where it's a yes or no, whether or not they take international students. But this is Steve Butler and his math RU list. If I do a Google search, I can probably find it. But his is the main one that I know of that kind of keeps track of whether or not an RU or in general a summer program would take international students.
As usual, you have never disappointed me. I ask the thing, you have an answer. So very impressive.
Thanks.
Well, I want to respect our time, and with that, I want to make sure that we once again thank you for a great talk, and make sure that you know how much we appreciate it, even though it's virtual and you can't hear us in person. And with that, I want to make sure that we wish everyone a wonderful day, and we will make sure that information is shared with everyone in regards to upcoming seminars. So. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wiegers. And
Thank you. Take care.